Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange Podcast. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence, to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's podcast.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. This is Hugh Ballou. And as usual, we have a fascinating guest today, He's a friend from 4 or 5, 6 years, somewhere in there. And we've had very little encounters, but every time we talk, I am greatly inspired. He's a writer, he's a nutritional specialist, he's a musician, a learned person who really enjoys discovery. And the things that he's discovered about leaders is something we're going to share today with you and with each other. And so Scott Stanley Smith, is it? I forget what the S is for, is our guest on the Nonprofit Exchange today. And Scott, one of the favorite quotes I have from the British composer-conductor Ralph Vaughan Williams was, "Music did not reveal all of its secrets to just one person." And what I say to you is you could replace the word music with leadership. So we can explore that just a little bit because you've interviewed lots of people in your time. So Scott, welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you're interested in this topic of leadership.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Hugh. And one of the central things that you learn about leadership when you study leaders throughout history is they are all thirsty for knowledge. They're curious in the broadest way, not just in their particular specialty, and that it's a process of continuous learning. Every time you think you got to the top of the mountain, there's another bigger mountain ahead. It makes it exciting. It keeps you humble. And my own background in this field that really got me involved was I started out at the same time that I was one of the founders of Vegetarian World, which was a predecessor to Vegetarian Times. This is 1973, before veganism became fashionable. And I was working with some famous nutritionists and learning about taking care of yourself is important to having the energy to be successful. But at the same time that I was doing that, nights and weekends, I had been, by almost a synchronistic accident, thrown into a position of managing a couple of large natural food stores. Now, this again was way ahead of it being fashionable. And I had never worked in a store before. I just kind of fell into the job. And so it was a steep learning curve. I learned about the importance of training, of learning how to work with people who are very different, and what customer service is, not just a slogan on the wall, but listening to people, trying to help them, putting them first, a lot of the basic principles. And the more I was involved in running this newspaper and the retail end, and I started reading business books, the more I realized there was a big disconnect between how most companies were run and the knowledge that was out there from some of the great business authors and thinkers about how they should be run. And so you see this enormous turnover in the business world, tremendous unhappiness on the part of employees. Most of the companies get very low ratings on how they deal with their people, and then people leave and you lose all that knowledge. So my interest in leadership and management really came out of my personal experience, hands-on managing businesses. And I went on, after I sold the newspaper to Vegetarian Times, I ended up running some other small businesses, and the same kinds of principles of success applied. And so then it was my privilege to move on, starting with an interview with Howard Schultz of Starbucks back in 1998, before anybody hardly knew who he was. He had just come out with his first book, and he was my first big kind of major CEO interview. And it's been my privilege to interview hundreds of others, and also go back into history and write about the great leaders of the past, everybody from actors to generals, and you find similar principles no matter the time, the place, the profession, that help people in becoming leaders. And I would say, given the more limited resources, those who are in the nonprofit field have the biggest challenges. They can't just throw money at a problem and, you know, hire the best CEO or whatever it is. A lot of this is really kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. So the things that I can share about the traits of the people I've interviewed could be useful for people who are wondering why they're not achieving the success that they'd like.
I was just looking on my AdWords account, and as you were talking, I was remembering that there's a lot of different definitions of leadership depending on who you're talking to. And part of the dysfunction or the lower functioning or whatever we want to call the situation you're describing, you know, there's the theory and there's the practice. In my AdWords on Google, over the last few years, the term "what is leadership" has been searched 15,200 times. So there's a lot of people out there trying to get their head around what is leadership. And so from your perspective, studying leadership, and you've written for Investors Business Daily, and you have other places. You post on LinkedIn, you post articles, you have 2 books, Extraordinary People, Real Life Lessons on What It Takes to Achieve Success. And then there's a book on public speaking. That's how leaders show up as influencers. So I would say that you know more about leadership than the average person on the street. So how would you put, if somebody said, well, what is leadership anyway, Scott?
One of our favorite leaders is Frances Hesselbein of the Frances Hesselbein Institute in New York. And, you know, she says leadership has to do with character and kind of the understanding who you are and what your goals are and how you get there with integrity, whereas management is tactics. It's a lower level, more mundane thing, but you really need both to be able to succeed. So, you know, what I would say is that business books, especially biographies, because that's been my specialty. So I've written for Entrepreneur and Success Magazine. I would say most of my 1,800 articles and the 190 publications and websites I've written for have been focused on what distinguishes the top performing companies and organizations from everybody else. You know, famously, Jim Collins wrote a couple of books, Good to Great, Built to Last, and he showed what there was in the gap between the number one company in any industry. Yes, that's our friend Frances Hesselbein. I've interviewed her twice. She's last I checked recently, she's 103, I think. I think she probably is the number one centenarian in the world as a leader. There may not be a lot of competition in that field, but she certainly is looked up to by the Army and, you know, everybody else. And of course, she was put in this position, for those who don't know, by Peter Drucker, who is considered the greatest mind in kind of in business management. Basically, he invented modern business management study. And he was asked, who was the greatest leader you've ever known? And he said, Frances Hesselbein. So that's the ultimate compliment. He plucked her from being the CEO of the Girl Scouts, which was kind of funny because she only had a son, didn't have a female child, but he was so impressed with what she was able to do there in turning around the Girl Scouts that he brought her over to what was then, I think, called the Peter Drucker Leadership Institute. So, yeah, so she's talked about this. What I would say is that in order to be successful, you have to kind of throw out the MBA. The problem with most
that's a good soundbite. I like that soundbite.
You know, it just over and over and over, you know, whether I've been an employee or self-employed or interviewing major leaders, it's just absolutely astounding how many people who have academic credentials but not enough frontline experience think they know better than the people who are actually talking with the customer. Um, this is almost like a truism where if you wonder why 99% of companies seem to get crummy ratings for their employees, uh, none of them talk to the people who are on the front line. And one of the companies that I've done a lot of work for recently is a good example of this. I collected a whole bunch of, there was a consensus in the places that I worked affiliated with this company, whose name will go unmentioned, about what was wrong. And it was basically came down to the fact that people with MBAs who thought they were smarter than everybody else had bigger blinders to their faults and their weaknesses and their lack of knowledge than anybody else. You have to be humble and a continuous learner and have a desire to know the truth. And it's just much easier for executives to hand down these edicts that everybody lower down realizes are going to make things worse, you know. So these are the problems that people run into are very, very common, and you have to study the tactics of management and at the same time keep your eye on the bigger picture. So we can get into quite a bit of detail what those are. One of the things, aside from the tactics, which are, I think, very, very interesting, there's a lot of good resources on it. One of the things that I've discovered that is common to the true leaders that don't necessarily go into a business handbook or a leadership handbook is, first of all the great leaders that I've known or read about are big readers. They have a thirst for knowledge and continuous learning. One of my favorite guys, Stephen Sample, the late head of USC, he wrote something called The Contrarian's Guide to Business. And he said, quit reading trade magazines, only read books that are at least 50 years old. You know, it's like they have some wisdom that will last. If they're still available and still popular, it means that there's something kind of, it's like the great books, you might say. And they love, most of the great leaders love reading historical bios because history gives you perspective. I know recently I read James Mattis's Call Sign Chaos. General Mattis was the recent head of the U.S. Defense Department. And he said, I told my Marine leaders that if they had not already read hundreds of books, they were functionally illiterate and a danger to their soldiers. And so I kind of share that. Somebody some years ago said Americans are illiterate. They could read if they wanted to. Now, as a freelance journalist, you know, back in the day, 20 years ago, I would get a 5,000 word assignment in Los Angeles Magazine. Now I'm lucky if I get 1,300 words at half the rate, because people have short attention spans. They think they can learn everything on Twitter. And I think anybody who with some perspective realizes this is really dangerous for business, for society, for nonprofits, for politics and everything else. If you don't read widely and know who the best opinion writers are in a particular field, then you're lost in your own experience, because your experience is extraordinarily limited. Second kind of trait I would say of a major leader, some of the major real leaders I've known, is they love travel. They're curious about other cultures. They don't want to just go to New Delhi in order to solve a computer problem or interview somebody they want to hire. They really want to get out and see the world. And I think Americans are dangerously isolated from the real world. They take care of their health. We talked about that. You cannot have the energy to be a great leader unless you take care of yourself. It's like if somebody doesn't go to the gym and get some exercise, if they don't eat enough vegetables, things like that, it will catch up with you. And guys are really slow to understand that until it's almost too late. Couple of other things. They're self-aware, or they try to become self-aware. The Greeks on the Temple of Delphi famously had a little carved slogan that said, "Know thyself." And too many leaders are perfectionists, workaholics. They have tempers, they're anxious, depressed, all these other things. These are all solvable problems. And but you can't solve them if you think you know everything, and if you're not self-aware. So I think Harville Hendrix, who wrote "Getting the Love You Want," among other things, he's Oprah's favorite relationship teacher. He showed in the early part of life we get brainwashed, we get subconsciously programmed, and we don't understand why we're getting in our own way all the time. One of my favorite leaders, Chip Conley, who had a boutique hotel chain in San Francisco for many years, wrote a book called "How Great Companies Get Their Mojo" from Maslow, who's the great psychologist. So you got to understand yourself and why you're getting in your own way, how you can kind of get out of your way. If you have a larger philosophy about what life is about and how you can help others, and you're motivated by just more than making money, that helps. So aside from the tactical aspects of management, within the high level leadership definition, there are a lot of elements that I find all the really what you might call nobly successful true leaders are. And those are kind of some of their traits, and we can get into the tactics whenever you want.
Sure. So they read, most of them are avid readers, they're well-traveled, self-aware. I heard you say that leaders get out of the way.
Right. Well-traveled, get out of your own way, self-aware, avid readers. Yeah, take care of your health, all those kind of things.
Okay. Health conscious. I would add, how do you spell conscious?
CONSCIOUS. Yeah.
So I would add to your list, if I may. As a musician, I'm thinking good leaders are also active listeners.
Oh, good point. And also, music has another function, and that is lead a balanced life. Don't just be a workaholic at the office all the time and neglect your family and your personal energy. Get out, have some fun, be inspired. That is a good point.
Well, so I got 7. We'll probably add to the list as we go. So those are really important. And what I flashed on the screen while you were talking was the second year, first edition of the Nonprofit Performance 360 magazine. And you had introduced us to Frances Hesselbein. And I believe you also had an article in one of those editions. Sandy, our acquisitions editor, is watching this, so she might reach out to you for another article. But Frances, she saw me twice in New York in her private exclusive office suite created by this big insurance company for her, and she's never paid a penny for it. Wow. And she has pictures of her receiving presidential medals, all 5 of them. And I think Ronald Reagan said, "Oh, Frances, would you be on my cabinet?" She says, "No, thank you. I'm busy running the Girl Scouts." She is feisty. And I was up there for her birthday, 100th birthday, and she had just had all the top brass from all of the military come and salute her at her desk. That is amazing. Stop the traffic. What's it, Madison Avenue or Park? One of those big streets in New York City. They stopped the traffic so they could go and thank her for what she had meant to them. So leaders are primarily, in my world, people that influence others and then impact others' lives. So over the course of time, now let's unpack a couple of these, and I have some other questions, but we'll get to what we can today. There's so much to talk about with leadership, and there's so many parts of leadership that people don't realize are parts of leadership. Like leaders are very active in building relationships. without relationships, you don't have leadership, you don't have communication, and you don't attract the funding you need. So this relationship piece is the key component underneath all of those that make it work. But you've interviewed a lot of people and you've written a lot of articles, so you have this vast knowledge base. Do you ever plan to do books on these articles? Would you have to work with one of your publishers to do that? Is there something on the horizon that you'd like to share some of these insights with the world at large?
Well, when I originally published Extraordinary People, and that project kind of went awry because the publisher wasn't the right one, but what I was putting into the book were basically the stories about fascinating people, half of them alive at the time and half of them from history, where for one reason or another I couldn't get an assignment for my column in Investors Business Daily. And a third of my 1,800 articles have appeared in Investors Business Daily for some years before they went weekly, despite the name, in June 2016. And I was in there twice a week, so I was cranking these studies out. And so Investors Business Daily is kind of a little bit underappreciated. It's got 385,000 readers, and they have a really strong interest, not just in financial things, but in management and leaders and who the great role models are. And so you can, if you go on investors.com and you just plug my name into search, you'll probably see at least a couple of hundred of the articles that are accessible to the non-subscribers. And so they especially have given me an outlet for quite a bit of influence. And the irony is I got a lot of assignments out of that book because after my editors read some of the things that they originally weren't interested in, they realized that people like Jim Henson and Ray Charles really, even though they weren't conventional business leaders, there were a lot of lessons that could be applied. So I still write for them. The guy that I just did, which nobody's ever heard of, Ron Nersessian of Keysight Technologies, it's a really, really important company. And at the same time, I've also been able to interview companies that are household names like Hilton CEO Chris Nassetta. And last year, believe it or not, up against Facebook and all these major and sexy tech kind of tech companies, the Hilton was ranked the #1 place to work for in America. And so I asked him a couple of, what made them so successful? Why did they get such support from their employees? And he said, first of all, management, the top management, including the CEO, they have to spend at least 1 week every year on the front line, hauling bags, front desk, working in the kitchen, as a reminder of what the work really is. Because when you're isolated, like most CEOs are, it's real easy to forget and hand down edicts. He also empowers the employees, much like the Four Seasons does, to solve problems. When he came on, they had 3,000 rules and he cut them down to 300. Make things simple, workable. You can prioritize 300. You can't prioritize 3,000. So it's been my privilege to have all these great outlets. I really had all the kind of the influence one can imagine with these 190 different outlets. Now I'm kind of semi-retired in the sense that I don't have to crank out 2 columns a week now. So I write like maybe 1 a month or something like that for them now. And I've got some pretty interesting ones coming up. So if you just search on investors.com, you'll see my latest. And a lot of these are companies that people don't know, but they all have incredible lessons to teach any leader. So
I'm
And
flashing.
an extraordinary people does have a lot of the things that have appeared in Investors Business Daily.
And people on the podcast can't see it, but I'll put a link in the copy for the podcast. I'm showing the Amazon page that says Extraordinary People, that you can buy it there. And from what you're telling me, it's a good, almost a textbook for life. So when you write about people, I know years ago somebody wrote about me in Forbes and wrote about what a conductor knows about leadership. It was all the unique, you and I resonate on a lot of these topics. It's the unique things, because a conductor is a leader. We build high performance teams and we have tangible outcomes, and we've got to do it within time parameters, and we got to do it in real time. And it's obvious instantly whether you're a good leader or a bad leader, because things can fall apart just like that. So I was impressed by people who were impressed that I was in Forbes, but I was also impressed the insights that Cheryl Snap Connor had gleaned from a short interview. And so do people ever come back to you and thank you for what you've observed about them?
Yeah, I do something that is not, a lot of editors and writers have the wrong idea about the attitude of PR people. They think that if you show them a first draft of fact check that they're going to censor it. That's not the case at all. It's a big misconception. And this comes from the fact that most business journalists have never worked in business. So they've never had a real job. So they don't really understand how management works and stuff. PR people are very sophisticated. I spent 14 years in financial PR, frustrated by the likes of Forbes, because quite often they would go to press with some article that had important factual inaccuracies. And then, of course, they would print the correction on page 45 in a corner, and you couldn't use the article online to share or in your marketing because of the flaws. So I made a point early in my career of letting the PR people fact check things, and they found mistakes. I mean, no matter how much you think you've studied a company. So Cheryl is very sophisticated and accurate. But I've had lots and lots and lots of people come back and say how much they appreciated it. Some of these things I've been able to do in person. My wife and I spent a couple of hours with Lee Iacocca, and he was a fascinating guy because we were interviewing him one after the other for a couple of very different publications. And we had a chance to hear him on the phone with, I think, the General Motors CEO at the time, and it was really a trippy experience because you would ask him a question and then he would spend 15 minutes and explore it from every aspect, starting with the beginning of the universe, And so as I was leaving, he said, "Scott, can you just make me sound intelligent?" So a lot of these guys are much more personable, down to earth, caring, human.
Mm-hmm.
And appreciative that you are going to, they understand that it's important to be a role model when you're in public, that they need to look at their own career and say, okay, I'm going to have 10 minutes on Oprah. What can I say that's going to make a difference? This goes back to wanting influence for a positive thing. And the great leaders all understand that. Kathy Ireland, who most people think of as a swimsuit model, has like a record of having been on covers, and but anyway, she started out when her modeling career was kind of fading. She started out with a couple of unique socks, and then she built it up into this massive specialty retail empire. And I was able to go on, she has on Fox Business Channel, she has a program, I was able to go on there. And, she was really, really a personable, great, caring person. And she said, if you're going to have a good influence, you have to live your beliefs and your boundaries. You have to think ahead of time about where you might be compromised and where you're going to draw the line, and never compromise your character. And if somebody turns you down in your effort to succeed, just don't let it go at that. Ask why and learn something from it. And so, I've been able to have these really fascinating conversations with people who might seem to be up on a pedestal, but they're still learning, they're still grappling, they're excited about success and people. They take an interest in people, and they usually have a really good sense of humor. Um, the study of great leaders is just endlessly fascinating, and you can take it back, way back, to the leader that Peter Drucker said was the greatest ever, and that was Cyrus the Great. Um, there's this great book out by called Xenophon Cyrus the Great: The Arts of Leadership, which is a translation and commentary by somebody named Larry Hedrick. And you go back, way back into history, and you find out, wow, 2,500 years ago they had the same challenges we did. How do you criticize employees or co-workers? How do you train people to get the results you want? How do you stay informed? Improve communication. Cyrus the Great kind of set up the original Pony Express, which was, they didn't have good roads, so he created them, and
Wow.
they created a messenger system. So, the human beings have not changed in a long, long time, and so he was a really great example. He probably, he's best known for letting the Jews return from what was Babylon and became Persia back to their home. He was religiously tolerant, and he also was famous for forgiving his enemies and bringing them in. You don't have permanent enemies. Some of the people that you're at odds with, and this certainly would apply to politics, you may need them at another point. You need to treat people as if they are temporarily opposing you on a certain issue, but never treat them in a way that you can't work things out in the future when you have common interests. So enough of my rant.
Absolutely. It's just such good stuff. You talked about ditching the MBA, and I find a lot of people with an MBA that don't have a functional knowledge of how business works. And what I see, I work with some corporate clients, and I see people from MBAs come in as a sideways move into management, and without even having worked their way up or having any knowledge. And so it's kind of wrecking the culture. I think about the Gallup polls, the surveys, and 70% of employees are either engaged or disengaged or highly disengaged, which amounts to $500 billion in lost profits. And so we're wasting the money when people are just, okay, what does he think who does he think he is? And a good example of that is I have a friend that's a senior mechanic for a major airline. And he got a new boss, and he said, "Hey, come here, open the manual." Says, "This is how we're going to do things now." And the guy put his hand up. He said, "What?" He said, "I wrote that manual." And so he didn't even have the basic knowledge of what knowledge people had. So there's this textbook knowledge, and yes, we have to read, but there's a real world benefit. And so having worked with studied leaders, and over multiple years, I brought in the best conductors in the world I knew to my church in St. Pete, Florida. And having a place in Florida to bring people in winter is an asset, but also having a good place to make music was also an asset. But every one of them had this trait of humbleness. They were really good at what they did, but they were so good they knew what they didn't know. So talk about this mentality of lack of self-awareness, and we come from an academic environment. How do we deal with that as a top leader, where you want to have people with some credentials, but how do you acquaint people with what real leadership is who want to be a leader?
Yeah. First of all, I think if you kind of come up to speed on the great thinkers in the leadership field and the management field, and require your management people, to read some of these books, like, let's say, Jack Canfield's Success Principles, John Maxwell's How Successful People Think, I mentioned Jim Collins. Brian Tracy's 100 Absolutely Unbreakable Laws of Business Success. I mentioned Stephen Sample's Contrarian's Guide to Business. If you get people to read these things, they will start filling in the gaps in their knowledge. The Netflix, Reed Hastings, I interviewed, and their approach is that they hire people for character and values, because particular aspects of an industry can be taught and trained. You need people who are committed to the values of the organization, have the big picture, and to give you kind of a contrary example of how this whole thing doesn't work in the conventional business world, one of the top recruiters told me that most of the time when they recruit from outside and they bring in somebody who has great credentials, by the time they can't reveal, they can't go checking references until the last minute, like they're down to like the last 3 candidates. Mm-hmm. By that time, they've already fallen in love with these 3 candidates. And so they will call the references who were supplied by the candidate. And of course, they give glowing reviews. And about 6 months later, they fall out of love with each other, because having the credentials doesn't really tell you much about the person. Is the person easy to get along with? Do they have, it's a little bit like a marriage. You could, on the resume, on the dating app, it can say that you're interested in, that you're Christian, Republican, and you love movies. Okay. Does that mean you love romantic movies or horror movies? Are you a fundamentalist Christian or a heretic? You can go through the whole thing, and what appears on the surface, I used to say about my ex, when it came to the nutritional field, I said, I think I'm strict. I think you're fanatical. And of course, she thought I was a little too loose as a goose. If you are not like on the same, if you're a workaholic and you expect people to be constantly checking their email and their Twitter feed and be available 24/7, if that's your idea of, somebody who's going to really be of service, and this doesn't all get cleared up in the interview, because you're still looking at that shiny object, the MBA, or the fact that the person was, the COO at another organization. The bottom line is conventional recruiting doesn't work. So it's just absolutely upsetting, and they don't learn from it. The MBA thing is kind of symbolic, because they have these nice, neat case studies, and they get out of school. It's the same problem with journalists, quite frankly. The reason I've been assigned so many articles is because the editors know that I have run companies and I have interviewed the top people, and I have a sense of the difference between, how the good companies operate and the lousy ones do. And I've interviewed some lousy CEOs too, so I have that in perspective. But I think, really making an effort to learn for yourself and your top managers what enlightened leadership is. Look at those lists of the companies that are the favorite of employees. What do they do different from everybody else in that field? The crazy thing is, it doesn't really cost much of anything. It's a matter of doing the common sense thing. If you are going to make a big change in the organization, have you gone to the people who are going to get the phone calls from the customers? I interviewed recently Avishai Abrahami, who runs a company nobody's ever heard of called Wix, W-I-X. They have 200 million customers around the world who want to build a website. And he really has a way of finding out the truth about what customers think, because he goes into the call center, which no CEO ever does, and he doesn't have them write down stuff. He interviews them on video, because he said too much gets lost when you reduce it to a memo. And he has a videotape discussion with them about what the customers are really saying. What do they need to do differently, you know? And he tries to make their product much easier to use than something like GoDaddy. They try to keep it simple. They listen to the customers in actuality, and they make changes in actuality. And it's been fantastically successful. So you wonder, you know, why doesn't GoDaddy, or why don't these other website competitors, why don't they copy them? It's because 1% of the companies are run in an enlightened way, and the outcome is better for everybody, the customers, the employees, and the vendors. But it's just amazing how stupid business leaders remain. You know, Jim Collins in Built to Last, kind of to boil it down, basically said, the number 2 company in the field knows what the number 1 company does, but they can't get there because they say they're interested in the customer and the employees, but actuality, their behavior shows, their policies and priorities show that they're really interested in their departmental budget relative to everybody else. They're really interested in career advancement and all these other things. Human nature gets in the way. So they know what the number 1 company does, but they don't know how to copy it. So if you're in a particular field, look at the best regarded company by customers and employees and learn from them and use them as a role model.
That's good advice. That's really good advice. I find over and over leaders think they have to have all the right answers, when really leaders should have all the good questions and listen carefully to the answers.
Yeah.
God supposedly said, we don't hire good people and tell them what to do. We hire good people, train them, and they tell us what to do. So I think the demise of companies is leadership. I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere around 53 of the original Fortune 500 companies are still in existence. You know, here they are, 500 of the best run companies. Yeah. And like when I had 5 Kodak distinctively different dealerships when I had a retail camera store. Kodak owned imaging in the world. They went into bankruptcy years later because they did not pay attention to how the market was shifting. IBM thought there was no market for personal computers and only a market for 3 big computers, you know, and the Swiss whole industry thought that the Quartz technology was a joke. So there's the future of your enterprise depends on the self-awareness thing that you talked about and continuing to learn. I serve as leadership coach for leaders in various fields, but I have a leadership coach who keeps me on my toes. And I think, you know, staying ahead of the curve I make a practice of doing what I advise other people to do, which is always have a coach. So any of those points you want to go down another window? We got about 10.
You know, it's kind of, I used to write for super lawyers and interview some of the best attorneys, and you know, they always say an attorney should never represent himself. You know, you cannot be objective about yourself, you know. So yes, you should have what was it, the kind of the court jester, part of his function was to keep the king humble, you know, tell him the truth that nobody else would, everybody else would suck up to the leader, you know. When you get smart people as your kind of your business counsel or your coaches or whatever, they come from different backgrounds, and it's kind of like brainstorming. If you just brainstorm by yourself, you're not going to get 1/10 of the good ideas that you would working with others. You know, you have to create a welcoming culture, and you know that means you don't criticize people in front of everybody else and humiliate them like so many managers do. The astonishing thing is that the secrets to success are well known both on a personal level and an organizational level. They are numerous, so you can never really fully, you know, implement them. But you want to have people in your organization who are idealistic for your whatever your organization is doing. And that means they have before anything else, a desire to achieve the loftiest goals of the organization. And they want to learn all the different tactics that will help get them there, and quit focusing on their own careers. Recognition may or may not come with doing the right thing, but if you come up with a lot of good ideas, some of them are going to be implemented. And you have to sometimes in an organization, if you're not the top person, find somebody who shares your ideas, socialize with people, get to know something, show an interest in people's personal lives and their outside of work lives, so that you find common ground. Maybe both of you love history or travel or certain kinds of movies or something like that. Go out to dinner or lunch with people and show a genuine interest in others, and then that will help you build alliances and get feedback, learn from other people. And yes, and people who are not big readers, like Richard Branson is dyslexic, and he has had ADD, and but he learned to be a great listener. So while he didn't read a lot, he's written actually some great books, some of the best biographies, like the Virgin Way and so forth. But he made himself very informally accessible. He would walk around offices. He would avoid having too many formal meetings. There's a lot of ways that he learned to intake knowledge. And I know that recently I didn't do an interview with Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of Square and Twitter, but he has a unique rule, I think, at Square, where if you have a meeting with more than one other person, you have to write up a memo about it. What did you discuss? What did you conclude? And share it with everybody. So there's lots of ways to learn from others, get feedback from others, and it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to agree, but you want to hear from others so that you can find out, what your blind spots might be, and everybody's got blind spots.
Oh yes, oh yes. Isn't that remarkable that we have blind spots and we don't see them? So this is fascinating stuff, Scott. So we're talking to clergy and nonprofit leaders of community cause-based charities, community foundations, membership organizations. So we're talking about business leaders. My position is that it's generic. Leadership is agnostic. It doesn't have, it doesn't look different in a local nonprofit as it does in a corporation. What is your opinion about how leadership is applied? There's some nuances in religious life and in community life for nonprofits, but the generic persona that you're talking about and the skill set of a leader, how is it different for nonprofits?
Well, I would say the pluses and minuses are, as we mentioned, that you don't really generally have the resources of a business. It's more like a small business, the way it functions with a limited budget and so forth. On the other hand, you haven't been brainwashed by the trade magazines and the corporate consensus and all the other things that end up having the industries become extinct and have unhappy employees and stuff. So it doesn't cost anything to learn, whether it's through reading real books, and incidentally, Kindle doesn't stick in the brain as well as a paperback or a hardcover does. But even if you're doing, like I'm doing a lot of commuting right now, and I have loved to get stuck in traffic, which here in Los Angeles is pretty common. And I just pop in a CD from the library or something I got on a biography or leadership or anything else I want to learn about, and just have that thirst for knowledge, because they're for the principles of leading any organization, whether it's 6 people or 1 million employees, are going to be the same. And you can never be too good of a leader and know too much. It's such an endlessly deep well of insights and ideas and techniques and stuff that what you should maybe do is talk to people either in your field or people who run other similar kinds of organizations, even if they're not direct competitors, and business leaders in your community on what they think are the most important lessons they've learned about being successful. I would say the biggest weakness from it is more tactical. I think that nonprofits do have that kind of idealism and commitment to a great idea that is often missing in business. When Merck was founded, George W. Merck, who was actually like the 3rd CEO, I think, he created the modern Merck company, which still follows many of his principles, with the idea committed to changing the world. So most nonprofit leaders have that idealism. That's a big advantage that keeps them on the right track. Where they're lacking is often the tactical management stuff. So some of the books that I mentioned can help teach real world examples of things like being an innovator. Like I think Brian Tracy might have mentioned that you shouldn't be happy with the first 20 good ideas that come out of brainstorming. Keep pushing, and you'll find the next 10 are the best ideas of all, because your brain goes into overdrive, especially when you're working with other people. And you can get a lot of the kind of the personal things, like Benjamin Franklin, for a few weeks, he would focus on one thing he wanted to, work on, maybe being a procrastinator or being late to meetings or whatever the issue is. If you can kind of be honest with yourself and discuss it with your coach and say, where do I need help? What am I not seeing here? What can I work on? Maybe, for example, I'm so overwhelmed and so busy, I don't get to the gym, or I don't eat right, or, maybe I drink too much, or whatever the thing is. Get people who will tell you the truth, or the truth as they see it. You don't have to agree with them. And, if you need a therapist, quite frankly, I went through 8 years of psychotherapy. It was Jungian dream analysis, and that made a big difference in my self-awareness and my ability to cope. Get some help from a minister or somebody you respect who has some level of wisdom, and help them fill in the blanks of your leadership and management skills. So, there's pluses and minuses. I think probably most nonprofit leaders, and I've been involved in that area myself, probably feel like their only problem is resources. But, if you're really, really creative, marketing skills are the least mastered of all small business and all nonprofit organizations. Regular business doesn't even really well. And there are books out on guerrilla marketing and, ways you can figure out how to spend an hour a day on social media, or going out to your local chamber of commerce and telling the story about your organization and why the community should care. And or you can do that with any business for that matter. Be committed to educating people on what you believe in, and they may reciprocate. So there are the leadership management challenges are similar, and you can learn from the big guys, and you can also see the mistakes that most businesses make, and you don't have to make, because you already have that idealism and you know what your philosophy is.
I have found great joy in reading about great leaders, and I've gone backwards by president by president, and found out a whole lot of disappointing things about every one of them. I mean, we want to point fingers and blame people, but talk about who's guilty, but I would challenge anybody, find anyone that's innocent. So, and that's politics. There's a difference in that and leadership. But someday I'd like to explore Napoleon Hill's works with you, because he certainly did like Scott Smith. He interviewed 500 people, and there was quite, and that
Yeah.
was,
In
that was,
fact, I would say don't expect to learn from people who are perfect. I would get write in and say, oh, this person was horrible. Here's things he did, da da da. And my response was, if you're only going to learn from perfect people, you're out of luck, because you're not perfect, and neither is anybody else. You can look at the glass half full. I recently did a story on Jeff Bezos. Now, he's got 1 million critics. He also is the world's greatest master of how to fail successfully. I mean, he has lost hundreds of millions of dollars on projects that he thought were really great, and he learned from the thing, and he learned when to get out and all that kind of stuff. So I tell people, accept the fact that all leaders, all human beings are imperfect, and the question is, it can be helpful to earn a negative lesson too.
yeah, I also think if you go interview the guy sitting under the bridge who's homeless, ask him, what did you do wrong? Scott Smith, this has been very enlightening. I'm going to give you a chance for a final thought, a tip or a challenge, or something that you want to leave people with. I want to do a sponsor moment. We stay in touch with our tribe, and our tribe is on CenterVision's leadership community. You can find it by going to this interview at thenonprofitexchange.org, the nonprofitexchange.org. And you'll find leadership interviews for the last 5 years, back when you and I first became acquainted. But we stay in touch with our people, not only with good social media and email marketing, but direct mail. Word Spread is one of our sponsors. Princeton Magazine mails it for us, stays in touch, and Bill Gilmer and his team know exactly top of mind marketing. Tell them what you're up to. Tell them what you've done. Tell them the impact of the money they've given you. Then they will continue being your supporter. So you can find WordSprint at wordsprint.com. Bill Gilmer and his team will help you out. Scott, we're coming to the top of the hour. What do you want to leave people with today?
I would recommend that nothing beats reading real world examples of leadership, because human beings are not as smart as they think. We think it's all left brain, MBA kind of stuff. No, we do better when we have examples. And if you read a biography, or even if you have kind of a superficial understanding of some of the great leaders, it gives you some common ground with other great leaders that you can share. And so one easy way to do that is I've got at least a couple of hundred articles accessible to the non-subscribers at investors.com. Just search my name, Scott Smith. You'll see them come up. A lot of them, you can't access the whole thing, but pick the ones you like. And I would recommend, you'll see in my presidential profiles that I go way back to the start of this country. My number one source of articles has been Alvin Felsenburg, The Leaders We Deserved. And he does a very objective ranking of the presidents. And here we are right at President's Day. And he shows you exactly what they did right and wrong. And there's tremendous amount that you can learn about the country, about yourself, and about great leaders by looking at his book.
That's good advice. So thank you for being here for this episode of Nonprofit Exchange. We're here every Tuesday at 2 Eastern on thenonprofitexchange.org. We have fascinating people, and they tell stories from their point of wisdom. What have they learned about leadership? What do we, as leaders in the social benefit sector, the for-purpose organizations, what do we need to know to do a better job? And how do we get out of this scarcity thinking that's prompted by the word nonprofit? Sure, we got to have some money left over to pay the bills and fulfill our mission. So it's a whole different mindset. And Scott, you've opened us up to a lot of that today. So thenonprofitexchange.org, you can find it on our website. There's a blue button in the corner. It says join the community, and there's a whole lot of stuff. So click the blue button and see what the options are. Basically, you're never alone again. You never wonder what to do next. You're in a community of support with resources and people, and you have access to me once a week for Q&A and office hours. So till next week, you can find the Nonprofit Exchange wherever you get your podcast. Just go look for the Nonprofit Exchange, and you can have us in your hand. And if you want our app, text 64600, 64600, and put in the letters LDR, short for leader. 64600, the message is LDR, boom, and you'll have all these interviews right in your hand. Thank you for being here today, and we will see you in the next episode.